You knew it was on.
Hi everyone. Welcome to our ESE350 online class now. So you all can all turn on your videos and you all can stay on mute if you want to. Yeah, turning on the video does not increase the bandwidth. Another thing you can do is you can go to the gallery view or the speaker view, and that allows you to watch many people at the same time. So we'll start in a minute or two. We'll let people come in. Yeah, so welcome again. So those who just joined in, y'all can turn on your videos so we can have our usual classroom setting. Hello. Okay, so let me know if you can't hear me, and you can, the best way to ask questions is to just unmute yourself and ask questions. If you're shy, you can ask questions on the chat, but just ask questions. We'll try to keep it as communicative as we are in class. And yeah, so you can turn on your videos and then we can see everyone who's here, and maybe we'll do a quick round of hellos from each person. I see Matt right at the top side over here, or we can start with people in the order of their names on the channel over here. Just say hi and say how are things going so far with you. Yeah, any order is fine. Just say hi. And
hi, things are good. I'm bored.
yeah, I know everyone's bored and you watch too much Netflix and too many shows already. So yeah, and if you don't have a mic, you can just ask questions, and yeah, that's also fine. Yeah. Oh, all right. So Zach, I got your message that you don't have a mic or camera, but you can ask questions on the chat. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go through a round of highs and hellos, and then we can get started in by 12:05. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah. Pretty boring here.
Hi, same here. My dog's really happy that everyone's home though.
That's good. That's good. Hi, Caroline. Hi, Luke.
Hi, things are good here.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Just going a little crazy with everyone, but I think it's yeah. I think yeah. Hi, Mika. Hi, Mark.
Hi. I'm actually still on campus. Things are good.
You. How is campus? Is it like a ghost town?
It's each day it gets more and more quiet.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like some zombie apocalypse or something like that. So yeah. So good. So I think as people are joining in, I expect this thing to go on for a couple of months. Okay, mentally, my mental model is that this will go on at least till August. Okay, so we don't know. Things can ramp up very quickly. So the US is about 2 weeks behind Italy. Our fearless leader is asking everyone to come back to work now, which is like the most idiotic thing. But and the problem is we don't know how it'll actually slow down, right? Because people start going out again, and then there'll be sort of relapses. So why do we care about having a good mental model about this? Is because just be prepared that this is a long sabbatical, right? I mean, what will happen about your summer internships? All those are questions that you can answer by and by. Um, for our class, luckily, we have an awesome set of TAs. You can see Chris over there. He is refusing to shave till Corona leaves the US, and then he looks cuter and cuter, right, day by day. So then, and then so Chris, Han Ming, Rahul, Ransford, Aditya, Lakshay, they've all been working really hard over the last couple of weeks to transfer the entire course to be online, which is quite a challenge for us because, we want you to have the actual hardware, and the whole point is to use the real hardware. Um, so can you get like 100% of the course experience? No, but we don't want it to be 50%. Can it be like 80 to 85%? Yeah, I think we can get there, and we'll work really hard to get your labs. So we've revived one of the previous labs that we had on this emulator, and that'll be a good way for you to actually understand how the processor works. The good part is that that's in completely on a virtual machine. Have any of y'all been able to download or clicked on the link to download the virtual machine so far? Okay, so download that because that's a pretty large link. So Chris, is that what, like 5 GB or something?
Yeah, it's about, can everyone hear me? Just thumbs up. Okay. It's about 5.1 gigabytes. We transferred it from Dropbox to Google Drive. So Google Drive tends to be a little quicker on that, but I expect it to take at most like an hour. And then there'll be some getting used to, setting up the VM, downloading the starter code. So expect to put away about like an hour to 2 hours into just getting everything set up.
Yeah, so that's basically like recreating like, a full new lab machine setup, because we don't want you to worry about installing new software, but you got to install the whole operating system, which has the software already installed.
I was kind of unclear. Will it all work on a Mac, or do I need to use a PC for it?
Good question, Chris.
It should work perfectly on a Mac. You'll just be using either there's a VirtualBox version for Mac, or we can get you set up with like Parallels or something. I think C's might have a copy of that and license for Mac.
Sounds good. I have a PC laptop, but it's like super slow, so I don't want to use it.
Understood.
Yeah. You do not need a PC or a Mac either, because you're going to use a virtual machine, and that's essentially allowing you to install a whole operating system on top of your operating system. And we have installed the software inside of that operating system. So it's kind of like you got like your ESE350 birthday gift, but it's wrapped up, and then it's wrapped up again, and then you can open it afterwards. But yeah, it's a pretty big package. So it's like a gigantic box from Amazon, and then inside is just this amount of code. But so same thing. So you should be able to run VirtualBox and then install this image. So and then in the image, then Chris has made 3 wonderful videos. So then part 1 is how do you get started with the installation. Part 2 is setting up the environment and getting the code running. And then part 3 is understanding what the lab is about. And then we'll have that as part of the recitation also, right? And the recitation is when?
So the recitation recording I posted on Sunday. So every Monday you can expect by at least Monday around like 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can expect a video to drop in the recitation notes folder just to do the kind of lecture part of the recitation. And then tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard, every Tuesday, I'll have a Q&A about what was talked about in the recitation.
Yeah. So attend the live things, because that'll keep somewhat of a routine, right? I mean, there's, gradually we'll go a little bit more insane if we lose the whole routine. And see, after many days, I shaved finally, and yeah, it feels strange, but I took a shower. No, I'm just kidding. I take a shower every day. And then I have to tell my kids to take a shower every day, because for them, every day is Saturday now. So, and the same thing for your worksheet, right? So the worksheet will use the Atmel Studio, and that is available on Virtual Labs. And have you all been able to run Virtual Labs? Anybody has been able to run it on Virtual Labs and were able to finish the worksheet? Yes, no, yes, no. Not tried yet. Who's not tried it yet? Okay, and who has tried it yet? Who's tried it so far? Okay, good. And it worked fine? Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so that's fine. So yeah, so that's taken care of. We are done with the Arduino stuff now, and so that's also good. And now we move to the to our own sort of virtual environment. And in the next labs, what you can expect is some other kind of a Docker-based system, or another kind of virtual machine, which will have the environments, and then you will be doing labs that are appropriate for the lectures. So how many of y'all watched the lecture for the real-time operating systems and for rate monotonic scheduling? Okay, because your worksheet will be based on that in the coming weeks. And so what we can do is first take a set of questions, and then based on those questions, I'll cover part of the lecture then, right? So because the lecture has just two important parts in it, and then I can cover those two. So, but by going through an example or two. So questions. So you can unmute and just ask questions. Yeah, unmute. Yeah, go ahead. You can just unmute and ask questions.
For a task that has a sort of longer period that might not be able to schedule it, can you break it up and like do it in parts?
Good question. Good question. So the task has like, what would be an example of your question like? One sec, I think you're muted. Okay, yeah, go. Could you repeat that? I just unmuted you.
There was a section in the lab where the period of the last one was, I think, 10 or something, and it looks like it's broken up, but I was just wondering if like most tasks, you can break them up. If they're longer, they're not going to be able to be scheduled in full length.
Okay, so for that question, so now let's take an example. If you have a set of tasks, let me see if I can find some example over here. I share my screen. Okay, can you see this? Okay, so let's say that. Okay, so in this case, we have say 3 tasks over here, and let me know if you can see the full screen version. Just put it in full screen. Yeah, okay. Can someone just speak up, because I cannot see y'all while I'm in full screen.
Yeah, we can see
okay,
it.
great. Okay, so what we want to do is basically have a set of, we're looking at a set of tasks over here, right? So so in this case, tau1, we'll just call it tau1, tau2, tau3. You can just call it t1, t2, t3, but the algebraic form is just tau here. And so this task over here, if we go back to the definition of the task, yeah, one sec. Yeah, so where a task over here has an execution time of 20 and a period of 100. So that means the utilization, that means it's requiring about 0.2 of the processor. So 20% of the processor is required there. Of course, this 20% of the processor doesn't mean any time 20%, right? It means that every 100 time steps, it requires 20 time steps. Now we haven't said, is this microseconds, is this milliseconds? In this case, it is just, some unit, right? And you can think of it as milliseconds. And so this means that that the utilization is dimensionless, right? So it just requires 20%. And now we have task 2, tau 2 over here requires 40 time units every 150, and its utilization is 26.7%. And then similarly, task 3 over here has a higher utilization. And so with this rate monotonic scheduling, essentially what we are trying to figure out is, first of all, is this task set schedulable? Why do we care? Because we want to know, well, will this task always get 20 every 100, 40 every 150, no matter what the other tasks are doing, like that, right? So with rate monotonic scheduling, the simple test was to use this upper bound test over here, right? And this upper bound test, and I can go into more detail, I'll just do a quick skim, where the upper bound test was looking at, well, is this task admissible or not? And if we just rewind a little bit, what we will see is that when we look at utilization of a task set, that means it's saying, okay, well, if I have a task set and I want to know, well, will it be schedulable? So in this case, I have task 1 and task 2. This requires 1 unit every 2 for a period of 2. So C is the execution time or the computation time. And then, yeah, question. Okay, sure, I can answer these questions as we go off. So, okay, so so in this case, what we are trying to do is we are trying to figure out, well, if I have 2 tasks, right? This is executing. You can think of this as a computational time, that is C, and this is the period. So that's 1 unit of computation every 2. And then here you can see this is the period. So it has a little bump here. And this is executing 1 every 2. Now task 2 has a computation of 1.01 and a period of 3. So that means its period over here is 3 and then 6. And so we want to figure out what is the total utilization of these 2 tasks. So we put C1 over P1, C2 over P2, and we add that and we say, hey, the total utilization is 0.833, right? So now the question is, can we schedule these tasks by just looking at this number of total utilization? Well, the common sense would say, well, I have a processor and I'm using 83% of the processor. I have 100%. So I should be able to do that, right? So who can tell me whether that's a true statement or not a true statement? Like I'm using less than 100% of the processor. Can I use it or not?
I think context switching may take some time, right?
Okay, so that's a good point. Let's assume context switching takes no time. Okay. So let's say context switching takes no time. I have 100% of the processor. I'm only using 83%.
It depends on the actual tasks.
What does it depend? Like why is it not schedulable, or why is it schedulable? I mean, my argument is it should be schedulable because 0.83 is less than 1. So what is the problem then?
You can just have a
The
scenario where you won't be able to actually meet the deadlines. If you, even though you have utilization left, there's just no way to do it without missing the deadlines of some of your tasks.
Okay, anyone else want to add to that?
I guess that 1.01 may cause some problem, right?
Yeah,
Say
I mean,
to
that's obviously the trick question over there. Who would have a task that is 1.01? And so yeah, so I think going back to what Matt was saying is I'll just extend that, right? So yeah, we have utilization, but now let's put it in the context of, like, say this week, right? If you have this 350 quiz, I don't know why we are scheduling this quiz 3 at on Friday. Can't we have it another time, right? And then you have some other homework deadline that is on Thursday, and that's going to take it's going to take you 10 hours to do the Thursday homework, and then it's going to take you uh, 10 hours to do the preparation for the quiz for Friday. It shouldn't take you that long for the quiz. It's not that bad. Um, so but you have from now till that time a lot of hours, right? So you have more than 20 hours. But the question is that you need to finish your Thursday deadline before Friday. So that means you have to finish. You don't have like as many hours as you have till Friday for Thursday. So that means for this deadline over here, I have to be able to use 50% of the processor, but before the time 2 over here, right? So it's not like on average or over a long duration of time, right? An average is saying over a long duration of time, I'm going to use 83%, but I need to have something done right now. I need to have something done right by a deadline. So a deadline is actually putting a stricter limit on what the utilization actually is. And so this is the average utilization of the processor over here. But the deadline over here is saying, no, I need 1 every 2 over here. So now let's fast forward this and see what happens. So for the task 2, I execute 1, but then this point 1, I can't execute because I got to execute task 1, because task 1 has the higher priority, and then task 1 has to execute, and then I move that to execute the point 1, but then there's no time remaining. And then now task 1 cannot be scheduled, and task 2 cannot be scheduled, and it misses its deadline. So comments, right? Why did we schedule task 1 when task 2 is going to miss its deadline? Shouldn't we just have finished up scheduling task 2 and then schedule task 1 after 0.01? You could do that, but in this rate monotonic scheduling, the process over here is saying that, look, the most frequent task, or the task with the highest rate over here, will have the highest priority. And why do we care about that? Because that's just one way of saying, well, how do we service tasks, right? When you go now, the other day I was going to go to Trader Joe's on 21st and Market, and there was a line from the Trader Joe's door just when it opened at 8:55 a.m. all the way out till Market Street. And so how are they scheduling when people come in? They're scheduling based on first come, first serve. And then, but say some person, really needs to get like something from Trader Joe's, toilet paper, right? They need to go to the toilet right away, but they are number 20 on the line. Okay, it's bad example, but anyway, I'll go play it ahead. And so that person has a really urgent task to do, right? But they are number 20 on the line, and then you'll say, hey, this first come, first serve is not fair because some people have more urgent work to do than other people. So they're just waiting, and but so it's not fair, right? So with rate monotonic scheduling, the policy, so it's just a policy, right? It's a policy saying that, well, the highest rate task, so in the rate monotonic fashion, is also the priority. So now in this case, we saw that, well, 0.3 over here is not 0.83 is not schedulable. But now let me show you something more interesting. Now I changed this task over here to be 2 every 1, and then 2.4, 1 every 2, and then 2.4 every 6. So if I add this up, the utilization is 0.9. Now the question is this schedulable? Actually, the utilization is higher in this case, right? Not lower than 0.83. And if we play it out, then we see, okay, well, I can schedule one over here, and then I can schedule another one. So I finished 2, and the first task is scheduled normally, no problem. The second task I have scheduled 2, and then here's the deadline, and then I can easily schedule 0.4. I have some time to breathe also, and then I'm done, right? So actually this is schedulable. So isn't it ironic that, something that has a lower utilization is not schedulable, something that has a higher utilization is actually schedulable? Now you can say, hey, what's the intuition, right? The intuition only goes this far, okay? The intuition doesn't go very far, but it just says that, look, this task over here has more breathing time, okay? So it has a period that is slightly longer than compared to its execution time, and that allowed it to fit. So here the non-intuitive part is that this is a combinatorial problem, and where the utilization and the schedulability of whether we can schedule a set of tasks or not is not based on what the utilization is. In fact, there is no clean relationship between the utilization of whether it is 0.83 or 0.90 and whether the task set is schedulable, because here I showed you a case where it is not. In fact, if we just take a random task set, some have a higher utilization and they're schedulable. Some have a lower utilization and they're schedulable. These are different task sets, just different combinations of 2 tasks with different periods and different execution times. So some are schedulable, not schedulable. Some with lower utilization, well, they are schedulable. Some with higher utilization are schedulable. Some with lower utilization are not schedulable. So you can see it's kind of spread out all over. So with this rate monotonic scheduling, what we can do is we can come up with some bound. We can say, well, what's the least upper bound under which, all the tasks are definitely schedulable, above which it's inconclusive whether they are schedulable or not. But under this bound, everything is definitely schedulable. So what we can do is we can make a claim, we can find this bound and say, well, as long as the total utilization is less than this upper bound, everything is schedulable with a very simple test that it's just below the utilization bound. Above this bound, we are not sure. So there are 2 parts to this lecture that you have to just care about, is what is the utilization bound test, and then to know whether a task set is schedulable. And then above this bound, we need to find another test, and that is called the response time test or the exact schedulability test. And I can go into that in more detail. And so the point here is, how do we find this least upper bound, right? So there was this least upper bound is to know, well, what is the lowest utilization of a critically schedulable task set? And what we mean by a critically schedulable task set is that whatever tasks are there, they're waiting to be executed. That means the tasks are ready and they're waiting to be executed, and so they're backlogged, right? So now if we look at how would we schedule things with rate monotonic scheduling, is that the scheduler, which is sort of like running in the background, that is the idle task, or that is task 0, or that is the kernel task, that keeps kicking in. Let's say it kicks in the Nano RK operating system, for example, it kicks in every 1 millisecond, and it says, okay, who's the next high ready task, and let's schedule that. So say task 1 comes in, it executes task 1, and again the kernel kicks in over here. At this point says, who's the next high ready task, and says, oh, task 1, you still need to be active. And then task 1 says, okay, I'm done at this point. And then it basically hands over control back to the scheduler and says, okay, I'm done. And the scheduler says, okay, let me look at who else is ready to execute. And then it says, okay, task 2, you can execute now. Again, it gets interrupted. And it says, task 2, okay, you can continue. And then task 2 says, I'm done. And then the scheduler says, okay, great. And then after the next, so this is called the OS tick over here. With that OS tick, with every tick, the OS is trying to decide who should be running. Should you continue to run? Should the current task continue to run? Or should I kick this task off and let the next task run? Because this OS scheduler is basically implementing the scheduling policy. And so far in this scheduling policy, we are basically following the rate monotonic scheduling policy. In the next lecture, we'll follow a more dynamic scheduling policy. And so we are just following that here, right? So there was a good point made earlier about, there is some overhead time, right? So there is some overhead time for the OS to actually kick in, and that executes here. So for most of the pencil and paper exercises that you get, we assume the overhead time is just 0. In reality, it's not 0. You have some overhead time for the context to switch between one task to the operating system to the next task and so on, right? So the OS over here, so this is called like a preemptive operating system, but the OS here is basically taking control of who gets to use the CPU at any time. And the OS is dictating, okay, task 1, you can go, you can continue. Now task 2, you can go, you can continue. Then task 1, 2, 1, 2 in this case, right? So the OS has to determine, okay, if I have a set of tasks now, tar 1, 2, 3, and they have some periodic parts of the task, that means run 20 every 100, 40 every 150, 100 every 350 milliseconds. They also have access to some resources over here, like a data server or a communication server, and different tasks will have access to those things. And these are shared resources. That means if one is accessing it, then the other cannot. And we will deal with this part in the lecture next week, where we look at priority inversion and how we actually have shared resources. For now, we just care about periodics. Later on, we'll also look at more complex tasks that are aperiodic, like that, right? So here you have tasks that don't have to happen periodically. You don't have an airbag deploying every 5 milliseconds. It's just that we need to give the airbag deployment some kind of task. That means when it actually occurs, it has a very short time. Within 50 milliseconds, we got to basically complete that task. But it cannot happen fast, like more frequently than 5 milliseconds, right? So but we are giving it some kind of pseudo period, but then we are just saying that like the airbag task will take 50 milliseconds to execute. Similarly, if there's like a backup, sort of like you sent your pathfinder to Mars or your Mars rover, and then every 2 milliseconds it just needs to do a routine backup and checkpoint with the base station that, okay, I'm okay, and it and it just needs to keep doing that routine backup there. So I'll just skip over now to to the question that, well, how do we start to think about these tasks, right, and their schedules? So if we have a task over here, and that is executing with this 1 every 4, 2 every 5, 2 every 10, then what we can do is just for the task 1, since that's a highest priority task, and how do we know that? Because its period is the smallest, right? Its period is 4 over here. That's for T. T or P is the period. And so we can just go ahead and basically schedule that always first. Then the next task goes, and the next task goes after that. And then it keeps following that. But this pattern need not always be the same over here. The pattern will actually get jumbled up after some point. Why? Because their periods do not perfectly align over here. And that's where we have this combinatorial problem, that they will have like a pattern. So when will this, suppose we play this out, when will this pattern actually start to repeat? Question for y'all. When will this pattern over here start to repeat?
After the least common multiple.
Yeah, and why is
The
that?
periods. Because then it's just going to be a pattern afterwards.
Yeah, so we're going to basically have this exact pattern over here. And in this case, the least common multiple is 20. So after this point, all we have to do is play this, just sketch this out till time 20. And then if we are able to schedule this task set according to our scheduling policy, then great. We are ready to go. And this is schedulable in this case, right? We don't have to continue drawing it out. So
is rate monotonic scheduling the name of the problem or the name of the algorithm?
So rate monotonic scheduling is the name of the scheduling policy, right? So like the line outside Trader Joe's has first come, first serve. Or if you have multiple queues, then they just go in and then you pick from Q1, then you pick from Q2, then you pick from Q3. Then that's called a round robin way, right? And then so there are many different ways to schedule tasks. Some are sort of some are more fair in the sense that they say, well, we don't care who you are, everybody is going to have an equal chance. But in this case, we want to have some aspect of urgency, that tau 1 is more urgent than tau 2, and so therefore tau runs more often. So the philosophy is that the tasks that are running more often are also more urgent. Now you might say, no, wait a minute, that's not always the case. Sometimes I can have a very important task, and then I can and that task could have a deadline that is very, a much longer deadline than the shortest deadline. So what do we do then, right? So that's when you have to say, well, which policy are we following? Are we following like a rate monotonic policy? Or are we following some kind of semantic importance problem? And so if we go to the start of the lecture, we have, I know I'm going in a different order, but I'm just going to follow the order of the questions here. So by semantic importance over here, we can say, well, suppose I have, let's look at this slide right over here. We have a very important task and its deadline is 25. And we have an important task and its deadline is 10 over here, right? So you say, look, this is really important task. It needs to run whenever it becomes alive, then it needs to run. And therefore, because you have said it's semantically important, right? That means you have decided that that task is, or you have identified that task is really important. Now say this very important task has an execution time of 10 every 25. And this important task has an execution time of 1 every 10. So now tell me, can this important task actually finish in this case? No, right? Because the 10 time units have been used up by the very important task. And so this is not schedulable. So the important task will miss its deadline every time the very important task executes. And so basically every other time is going to miss its deadline. And so then what do we do with that, right? So, well, we say, well, if you're going to miss this deadline, then maybe we have to have a different kind of policy. If we have a policy that says, okay, well, if you're going to run very frequently, then you run, finish the important task, and then still make sure that when this very important task comes in, it executes, but it gets preempted by this important task because that's the highest priority task now based on rate monotonic scheduling. And the very important task still finishes before the deadline. The key goal for all of these real-time scheduling algorithms is finish before the deadline and or finish at or before the deadline. And if you finish after the deadline, that's too late. The airbag will deploy too late and the person will die. If you finish before the deadline, then we are fine, right? And if you within this sort of waiting time over here, and so we want full utility if you finish before the deadline, and there is no utility or negative utility if you finish after the deadline, or there is a penalty, that basically that company will get sued, people will die, and bad things will happen if you miss a deadline in this case. Now you might say, wait a minute, not everything in life is that strict, right? I mean, you can get like, if a video frame comes in a little too late, then what happens? The video quality becomes a little blurry, or there's a slight lag, and we can tolerate a slight lag now and then, right? And so that's not a big deal over here. But now if the lag becomes worse and worse, then you have a graceful kind of degradation over time, that as you're missing the deadline, then your utility basically gets lower and lower. So essentially with a hard real-time task, your utility is very clear, that if you miss a deadline, then you have a negative utility after that point. But with a soft real-time task, like say video or sometimes like voice, then there's a graceful degradation. Voice degrades much slower than video. But with video, if you have like a missed deadline rate of about 2 to 3%, then the screen starts becoming green and you get all this botchiness all over. and then you just can't watch the video, and then you just say, okay, fine, I'm done. But it can still tolerate some deadline misses over there. Now, say you're backing up like some big file onto Google Drive, and instead of 2 minutes and 20 seconds, it takes 2 minutes and 21 seconds. You're like, no big deal, because there the utility of it, backing up is you're just trying to say, okay, go faster. That's it, right? So let me so going to now, this is a long-winded answer, but going to the question that what if I have these tasks now? Can I just split them up? Can I split up like if I have a task set over here, can I split up this task period that is over here? And if this task period is at this point, this is the period, can I just split the period into half and then just see if it's going to schedule that? So what happens if I take this period and I make it half, then, and I want to see whether half of this task executes in that time? Is that the same problem as whether this full task executes in this time, right? So is it kind of like, is there some kind of a commutative property that if I want to schedule this full task, say if I want to execute 2 time units or 3 time units of this task every 6, and can I execute, is it the same kind of task for me to execute 1.5 time units every 3 time of a period every 3? What do you guys think? Can we just sort of say, instead of having this long deadline of 6 time units to finish 3 time units of execution, can I just say, oh, let me just make it into half of 3 time units for the period, and I want to finish up 1.5 time units of execution? Is that the same problem? Can these problems be divided?
I think that makes the problem harder because you have less flexibility about how you can schedule the task. So you could have like put all of the execution in the first half of that period, but now you're forced to split up half the execution between the 2 periods.
Yeah, so
it's not the same problem.
That's the right answer, right? That makes this basically an over-constrained problem, because now you have less flexibility in terms of, how much time you have to finish up your work, right? It's sort of saying that, look, guys, you have 2 weeks to finish up this lab, and you can do it whenever you like. And there are 2 parts to the lab, versus us saying that, okay, you got to finish part 1 by the first week, and then finish part 2 to get checked off by week 2. I mean, that puts you on a better schedule, and that's in many cases it's better for everybody in the class, but it just puts more stress in the sense that, okay, I have to finish task 1 at the first half by this weekend, right? Versus you could just crunch through it over the weekend and finish the whole thing in one sitting, right? And so let's go through the next question over here, right? What does it mean to be preempted, and can you explain what is the response time test? Okay, so when a task is running, right? So say we have these 3 tasks over here. So and if you are executing using this rate monotonic scheduling, now my first question is always like, okay, why are we fixating on rate monotonic scheduling? Why can't we pick another one? And so the first reason is, if you look in the beginning of the slides, is that rate monotonic scheduling, first of all, has some very provable properties, that if a task set is schedulable by rate monotonic scheduling, then none of the tasks will miss their deadlines, right? So, and there is a proof for that, and that kind of proof is not possible for, say, like a first come first serve, where the ordering is not predetermined like that, right? Or you can say, okay, well, I have a fixed order, first execute task A, then B, then C, and then keep repeating that. But task A could have a different execution time and period. Task B could have any arbitrary execution time and period. And then we just can't say much about that. For every task set, we'll have to actually go and draw it out and see whether it's schedulable or not. So what we actually want is some algebraic way to figure out, not to just keep going and sketching it out and, you know, using pencil and paper. So back in 1973, there was a seminal work done by these two authors, Liu and Leyland, and they were able to prove that, you know, using rate monotonic scheduling, it is the optimal static priority scheduling algorithm. And by that, what they mean is that if the priorities are determined at, you know, uh, at design time, right, at compile time, and therefore the priorities are static throughout the execution of the task set, then whatever strategy you pick, whatever scheduling algorithm you pick, rate monotonic scheduling can also schedule it in that way, right? Can also schedule the task set using rate monotonic scheduling, right? So that's a pretty bold statement. It's saying that, you know, if we are to decide what is the order of the task to execute, and you pick some order and I pick rate mono, or these guys, they say we'll pick rate monotonic scheduling. If you can schedule your tasks using that fixed priority, so that static priority scheduling, that means determined at design time or at compile time, and then it's fixed for the duration of the execution of the task set, then they can also do just as good. They can do just as good or better than you do that, right? It's kind of like when you fight with your younger brother or sister, and, or, you know, or older brother or sister, and they say, I'm better than you. And then you say, I'm better than you +2. And then they say, oh, I'm better than you, but I said I'm +2. And then you're always winning. So you're always better than them +2, right? Or +10. So that was a pretty bold thing. The other thing that they found out was, which we'll cover in the latter part, is that when the system starts to get overloaded, then we don't want the high priority task to die. We want the lower priority tasks to basically fail first. And we want to make sure that the high priority tasks get, you know, fail last, right? If the system starts to overload for some reason. And so let's go through this question of, okay, so if we are executing a task set now, say there's task 1, 2, and 3, right? So task 1 basically is the boss task, right? In the sense that nobody can come before this task, and therefore nobody can preempt task 1. But what task? So at this point, when we have these down arrows here, it means that all the tasks are ready. They have all arrived. And that means they all have work that is ready to be done, right? So that means I have received a video buffer and I need to decode it. And I need to display that on your screen. I've received an audio buffer, audio packet, and I need to decode that, and I'm waiting to do that, right? So that means I have work that is waiting to be done. And in your context, you can say, well, I have homework for this class, I have lab for that class, I have to study for quiz. And then you're saying, okay, I'm backlogged. I have quite a few things to finish, you know, this week before I can, you know, go and watch, you know, binge watch some show for another 8 hours. And so task 1, tau 1 over here is the highest priority task, and it basically preempts these other tasks. And preempt basically just says, okay, guys, you hold on, I'm going to run first. And so preempt is like someone cutting the line and saying, I'm going to run first because, you know, I'm some ambassador of, you know, United Kingdom, and I basically go to the head of the line in the immigration line, right? And you're just a regular citizen. Too bad, right? And you're like, hey, wait a minute, how come you get such a special treatment, right? That they say, because I'm tau 1. And tau 1 has a special treatment that it can preempt all other tasks. Tau 2 can preempt only tasks that are lower priority than it, and gets preempted by tasks that are higher priority than it, right? So tau 2 is basically getting blocked over here, and it cannot run because tau 1 has to run in this case. And tau 3, poor tau 3 gets preempted by tau 1 and tau 2, right? So preempted just means that it's not going to get its turn until the higher priority tasks get their turn over here. And we can see that repeats over here. And especially in this case, right? So here tau 2 is running, and in the middle of tau 2 running, tau 1 comes in, and tau 1 says, hey, move aside, I got to execute. And then you can basically continue to execute at that point over here, right? So in fact, if you look at tau3, tau1 basically, whenever tau1 arrives, you can see that by the down arrow, it always executes right away, like that, right? And whenever tau2 arrives, it has to wait a little bit, but then it executes and finishes. It has to wait a little bit. Here it executes right away, finishes. Here it executes right away, finishes. Here it executes, gets preempted once, and then finishes. Tau3, the poor guy over here, he has to wait first of all, and let's call him a he because poor guy, right? And then whatever, it's just a task, right? So it has to wait, and then it starts to run, gets preempted by tau1, then gets preempted again by tau2, and then it has to basically 1 second. And then again it gets preempted by tau1, gets preempted by tau2, again gets preempted by tau1. Finally, it gets to finish at this point. Luckily, this is before its deadline over here, right? It's executing 2 every 10, and so far this task set is schedulable so far, right? So far what we have covered is, what is this kind of, utilization bound. And so what Lou and Leyland found out is that if I take the utilization for a task and I add up the utilizations for all these tasks, I have a CPU utilization that is U, which is the sum of utilization of task 1, 2 till task n. And what they found out was that since this is a combinatorial problem, they could find a utilization bound based on the number of tasks, not based on the utilization over here, right? So, so it's actually based on the number of tasks, because here we are trying to basically fit in these different units, and it doesn't be like, so we're just saying, well, if I have one task, then that one task can get 100%, go up to 100% utilization, and it's still schedulable based on rate monotonic scheduling. If I have 2 tasks, then as long as their total utilization is less than 0.828, they are schedulable for sure. And if their utilization is higher than that, we're not sure. It's inconclusive by that, right? And this was found out by Lou and Leyland in this paper in 1973. And they did not use simulation. They did not use machine learning. They just did good old-fashioned maths to figure it out. And they figured out, okay, well, this is the utilization, and they just use this formula over here, which you need to remember, right? What is the utilization bound? And now, how did they derive that? Normally in this class, we would actually have to go through and learn and read this paper and derive that. So when I took the real-time systems, we had to actually do the proof and understand the proof for how that happened. But for now, this is just a rule of thumb, right? So because this only goes so far, all it says is that if you are less than or equal to, given the number of tasks, if the total utilization of the task set is less than or equal to this utilization bound over here, you're definitely schedulable. But if you are above this utilization bound, then it's inconclusive. It doesn't say you're not schedulable, right? Like we saw in the previous example where a task set with 90% utilization was schedulable, but a task set with 83% utilization was not schedulable, right? For those 2 tasks. Let's look at, so what this means is that as the number of tasks increase, this basically saturates to a limit of about 69%. And it says that if you're, if you have many tasks and your utilization, that the maximum utilization that you can have for which we can say that the task set is definitely schedulable is just 69%. That means you give me a 1 gigahertz processor, and I basically cannot use the full power of that processor because of this combinatorial constraints that I have over here, right? So now let's look at a task set where I have this execution time periods and utilization. So for 3 tasks, my total utilization is 0.753, and that is less than the utilization bound for 3 tasks. If I go back to this, for 3 tasks, it's 0.779. So what can I say in this case? Definitely, this whole task set is definitely schedulable, right? Because it satisfied this upper bound test over here. And this upper bound test is just so simple. But what we are, and then if you look at how the schedule goes, then you'll see that, right? But what we are interested, and the usual kind of problems you would get is, what is the total utilization of this task set? we just add the utilizations. Is this task set schedulable? We just check with the upper bound test. Yeah, it's schedulable because the total utilization is less than the utilization bound based on the utilization bound test. And then what is the total utilization now? If C equals 3, right? So here, if we go back to this, we had C equals 2. Now C equals 3. Well, we need to see what happens over here, right? So C equals 3, and then we see that the utilization is 0.9, which is greater than this upper bound test, and therefore we wait a minute. We are not. This is greater than. So what can I say about this? What can we say about this now over here? If it's not satisfying this utilization bound test, it's not schedulable, right?
It might be schedulable, but not with rate monetization.
Actually, it's inconclusive, right? We do not know. It might be schedulable with rate monotonic scheduling itself. So what do we do next is we just draw the timeline. We draw the timeline and then we say, okay, look, this timeline has to go on till 20, and then we just draw it, and let's just say, okay, looks like it's schedulable and we can execute it till the lowest common multiple, and that lowest common multiple for that period is called the hyper period, right? So, and the hyper period is basically just saying, sure, we can schedule it, but now you're like, wait a minute, I want something that I can code to make sure that every time I add a new task, like you join, you go for your internship in the summer, and then they say, okay, we have a task set that has these 5 tasks in SpaceX, and now we want to add, some other new nav module for our Starlink system so that we can launch 60 satellites at the same time from the same payload. And so we have to add this new kind of sensor over here, or a dynamic weight sensor, for example, because as the satellites are launching, it shouldn't sort of make the rocket wobble, right? So like, okay, well, if you're going to add like this new sensor, then I need to basically sample this new sensor, and I'm basically adding a new task. So if you're going to add a new task, you don't want to draw this timeline every time over here. You want to just have this kind of test in your code to see what you can do over there, right? So, and so so then you want to sort of figure out whether you can do it in that way, right? So, but right now we just have, sure, success if it is less than this bound, inconclusive if it is something more than that. We know, well, if it's more than 100%, then it's, overloaded, right?
If the utilization is above the bound, and you try scheduling it with rate monotonic scheduling and you figure out that you can't, does that mean that it's not schedulable at all with other scheduling techniques as well?
It's not. Yeah, that's a good point. So if it is not schedulable by rate monotonic scheduling, it's not going to be schedulable by any other static priority scheduling or fixed priority scheduling algorithm. And what that means is that if you decide on what the priorities are at compile time, then it's not going to be schedulable. Yeah, so then you're game over there.
So rate monotonic scheduling is kind of like
it's
a lower bound kind of on all scheduling types.
The non-quotation way of saying it is that rate monotonic scheduling is the optimal scheduling algorithm. And okay, that means if it is not scheduled, basically you're just saying, look, so I'm training for this Philadelphia marathon, right? And my time is like way below than, say, the top guy, right? And so basically they say, well, if you can finish this marathon, I think the fastest they've done is like 2 hours now, which is insane. Okay, and so for a marathon, and so that person is basically the world's best, right? If you anyone less than the world's best is not going to be, faster than 2 hours to finish a marathon. So same thing in this case. This is anything that is optimal. In this case, it's saying that, well, if the best can't do it over here, then neither can the rest.
In what sense is it optimal, though? Does it like maximize utilization?
It's optimal in the sense that if there is a task set that any other algorithm, fixed priority scheduling algorithm, can schedule, then it can do it too.
Okay.
It's basically saying that it's the fastest marathon runner and no one is faster than it, or no one is better than it. If there is someone who is also like, very good, then we are just as good or better than that. So basically in the sense of a task set, if there is a task set that, another scheduling algorithm can schedule, then rate monotonic can schedule it. If rate monotonic scheduling can't schedule it, then no other scheduling algorithm can do it with that, right? So that's a pretty that's basically like a very refutable statement that so that's what we want with our safety critical code over here, right? So now comes this second part, right? So what you need to know in the first part is, okay, what are tasks? How do tasks get scheduled? There is something called overhead. So far we have ignored the overhead. So the first part of this lecture till this point over here is, what is this upper bound test? How did we come up with it? And the upper bound test is not based on, the utilization of the individual tasks. It's just based on the number of tasks that we have. And the upper bound test has this limitation, right? That means if it's in this regime over here, then it's inconclusive. And then what we have resorted to so far is just drawing, the system, right? So in the last, so I'll spend 5 minutes now on the second important part of this lecture, which is basically this response time test. Just saying, hey, we know basic algebra, and we don't want to draw things out every time. Elon Musk comes and says, you need to add a new task, then I'd be surprised if he comes and says that. But if he does say that, you have to add a new task to your system, then we have to start drawing stuff around, right? That's so 1972, before this Liu and Leyland paper came out. So what we're going to do is, from the Liu and Leyland paper, we're going to see how did they come up with this response time test, which is basically like a very conclusive test to figure out this regime, right, of this part over here. So can we come up with that, right? So, and what they use is basically like a iterative formula that says, okay, so we have a set of tasks, and all the tasks are, in this critical instance. By critical instance, we mean that they all have some work that is backed up, and all the tasks have work waiting to be done, right? So, and that's called a critical instance. That means that that's when the processor is the most stressed, right? So that's usually like, in the week of midterms and the week before the finals, everything is due, projects are due, everything is due, and you're the most stressed out. When are you the most stressed out? When every class and every club and everybody is asking you to finish something, right? So all the tasks are requiring that the processor finish its work. So the response time test over here is saying, okay, well, we're going to figure out whether all the tasks that are waiting and that have work to be finished, we're going to see whether they all complete within what is the response time of the task that is the most penalized, right? So we're going to use this response time test, and basically uses this very simple formula, and explain what this formula is. And all it's trying to figure out is the response time of when this task completes, is that response time an less than the execution, the period of that task, right? Suppose the task had to finish by 350 milliseconds and the response time was 300 milliseconds. That's great, because the task finished before its deadline. But how do we figure out that, right? So the reason we have this formula over here is because suppose I'm tau 3, I always get preempted by tau 1 and by tau 2, and then like I showed you in that time, right? So we need to figure out, if I just go back to that example in this case, right? So tau 3 over here is waiting to run, but then before it gets to run, it has to wait for tau 1 to run, then tau 2 to run, then it gets a chance to run. Again, it gets preempted, and then finally it finishes over here. Now we need to figure out how many times is tau 3 getting preempted by the higher priority task over here till it finishes. And we need to figure out how to do that iteratively, right? Because, and we'll walk through an example over here.
Can you show what response time is in that picture?
Yeah, good question. So in that picture, yeah. So the response time. So here tau3 has a period of 10 time units, and tau3 it finishes by 8 time units in this case. And then tau3's deadline is here at 10. Tau3 is again ready and waiting, but gets preempted, and then it finishes a little earlier. It finishes by 15. So in this case, it finished at 8. 8 is less than 10. Great. Tau3 is schedulable. 15 is less than 20. Tau3 is still schedulable. We are done with the hyperperiod. This pattern is going to repeat. So tau3 is always schedulable. But the thing is, we don't want to draw this out, right? So the response time is when the two units of execution complete. Like all the work that is there for this task completes. So who can tell me what is the response time? Let me just rewind back. What is the response time over here for tau1?
Is it just 1 unit?
Yeah, tau1. Basically, tau1 is like this global entry, free and clear, diplomatic passport. They don't ever have to wait for anything, right? So basically, it's like you're always the highest priority, like that, right? So so then you're always the highest priority. You don't have to wait for anybody, and so tau1 never has a problem. We don't have to worry about tau1 actually. Tau2 we have to worry about, tau3 we have to worry about. So let's look at how we worry about them in a sequence, right? So let's go to this response time, and so here we have, so don't worry about this algebra yet, right? It's actually very simple, but it just requires like 2 minutes of intuition. So here we have this task set. Previously it had a utilization bound, that we could conclusively say is schedulable based on the upper utilization bound test. But now I'm going to increase this execution time to 40, and therefore this utilization goes up to 0.4. And so is this task schedulable, right? So now we're going to do it task by task wise, right? So the first two tasks, we can just split their utilization, collective utilization, 0.4 plus 0.267. The first two tasks over here have a utilization of 0.667, which is less than the utilization bound test for U2, right? What is U2? Who can look it up and tell me what is U2? That's the utilization bound, limit based on the utilization bound test. Who can tell me what is U2 by looking it up in the earlier?
I think it's 0.828.
Yeah. So sorry, that's right, written right there. So so basically that's less than that. So what does this say? It just says, look, the first two tasks, don't worry about them, they are schedulable. But now if I add the third task over here, the third task, basically it's 0.935, we've added that, it's less than U3, and now that's inconclusive. I don't want to draw it out, I just want to use this response time test to figure that out, right? So we want to apply this response time test, and then so let's see what this response time test is now, right? So what you need to keep in mind is this slide over here, right? So we have tau1, tau2, and then we're just going to draw them out. Tau1 is super easy to draw because it always just runs right away. It's global entry, whatever, TSA pre-check, all of that, right? It's all check. It always runs. It does not have to wait for anybody. Tau2 only has to wait for tau1, and tau2 will just basically just follow whenever it needs to run after tau1. So tau1 and tau2 are schedulable based on the simple utilization bound test. Tau3 we are not sure, so we are only going to do this test for tau3. We're not doing this test for the task set. Okay, so we're just basically trying to see does tau 3 meet its first deadline? When does it meet its first deadline, right? And tau 3 has a deadline of 350 time units over here. It has to finish 100 units of its work in 350 time units over here, right? So first we say, okay, let's look at this, right? So tau 3 is getting preempted by tau 1 once, tau 3 is getting preempted by tau 2 once, and then tau 3 can start to run. But how much is task 1 and task 2? So we need to add up the basic time that it takes me to finish tau 3 to finish its work is the execution time. Once it's going to get preempted by tau 1, once it's going to get preempted by tau 2, and its execution time, right? So that's 40 plus 100. So the minimum response time for tau 3 is going to be 180, right? So and then if we go to this figure, we say, okay, well, it took 40 plus 40 and plus 100. Wait a minute, it was starting to execute and got preempted again. So now we are basically looking at 180 over here, and we're saying, hey, we don't get preempted just once by tau 1 and tau 2. We get actually preempted again by tau 1 and tau 2 and we're just saying, so far the minimum time for me to finish my work is 180, because that's when I just get preempted once by tau 1, tau 2, and then I finish right away and I'm at 180. But actually, while it's trying to still finish at 180, tau 1 comes in again, tau 2 comes in again. So then let's go back over here. So this is the first iteration and says this is the minimum guess, right? This 180 is the minimum guess. Let's start there. And then I said, wait a minute. Now, if 180 is the time that I'm definitely going to be running till, will I get preempted by tau 1 again? Will I get preempted by tau 2 again? So then we look at this sigma over here, and the sigma is saying who are the higher priority tasks, right? So higher priority tasks are indexed by J, and so that's tau 1 and then tau 2. And so then we say, okay, well, in if A0 is 180, so in 180, how many times will tau 1 come in? So then we go back and say, okay, well, tau 1 comes in at 100, tau 2 comes in at 150. So then I say, okay, well, I'm going to have 180 divided by 100 multiplied by the execution time. So this is just saying that in 180, tau 1 will come in at least twice, right? Over here. That's why we have this ceiling function over here, because the tasks will come in at least, at the most twice in this case, right? So we have the ceiling that says, okay, this is 1.8, and the ceiling will make it 2 times the execution time of tau 1, that's 80. So I need to add that to my account over here. And then tau 2 over here will come in 180 divided by 150, that's 1 point something times 40. So that's 1 point something also becomes 2. And so that means I have to say, okay, it takes me 100 time units to finish my execution, that's C3. And then tau 1 will come in 2 times and finishes execution. So tau 1 will eat up 80 time units, tau 2 will come in and eat up 80 time units. And now my response time so far is that I'm at least going to be waiting till 260 time units. So far, are you guys with me? It's just basically saying that, look, I'm right now at 180 and I'm going to get preempted once by tau 1, again by tau 1, once by tau 2, again by tau 2. And then now, wait a minute. So if I'm going to get preempted by these, I need to add up all the time that I'm going to get preempted by them till this 180. And that's going to push my time out to 260. Questions?
If a task set meets the utilization bound, so it's definitely schedulable, does that mean that it none of its tasks will ever be interrupted? So like they start executing and then get preempted and then start executing again?
No, it means that they will get preempted, but they will still finish by that time. So for tau 1 and tau 1 and tau 2, they satisfied this upper bound test, right? This utilization test.
Right, and
so
I was just observing. I was just observing that if you go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Or maybe 2 slides ago. Yeah, there. Tasks 1 and 2 never get interrupted in the middle of their executions.
Oh, well, task 2 could get
Is that
interrupted, right?
is
We
that
are
just a
seeing
coincidence or
that's just a coincidence.
okay?
In the other example, right, if we rewind many slides before, there are, I can give you many examples where, you know, they get preempted many times like that, right? So like if you look in like over here, right, task 2 gets preempted by task 1 because it
Yeah,
just
but
it
is
just
this
depends on the
one?
alignment of the periods like that, right?
Yeah, but is this one below the
Yeah, this one is
utilization
also
bound?
below. This one is also below. So
Okay.
that's the whole point, that the utilization of the task over here does not determine whether it's schedulable or not. It's the total utilization over here. It's the number of tasks, right? And what is the utilization bound for that? So in this case, tau 2 is getting preempted sometimes by tau 1. Sometimes it's not getting not preempted, not preempted, not preempted, preempted, not preempted, and so on, right? So this pattern will then repeat. So whether you so the rule of the world is, just think about it like this, right? You are just a regular US citizen or whatever. You're just you don't have TSA pre-check, and you're coming into immigration, and then a TSA pre-check person comes in, and then a diplomat comes in. So let's say tau 1 is a diplomat and tau 2 is a TSA pre-check, right? You're all you any lower priority is going to be prone to getting preempted by any higher priority task, right? So do you get preempted every time? Not necessarily. It depends on the whether, you know, what was the period of your task and how the phasing of the other tasks are, right? So that's the question over here. So it just depends on the relative, you know, positioning of the tasks, and that's this combinatorial problem that we are trying to sort of address. And so it's difficult to form like an intuition for this, right? So it looks like a really simple problem. I just have 3 tasks. Can I schedule them without drawing this out? And all we are trying to do here is an iterative way of looking at, okay, so far my horizon was 180, and then I saw in 180 I actually can get preempted twice by tau 1 and twice by tau 2. So I have to add 40 plus 40, 40 plus 40, and now my horizon has shifted to 260. So now I'm going to 260 over here, on around over here, and then wait a minute, I get preempted a third time by tau 1. So I need to see if my math works out. So I'm going to see now. So I started with A0, and A0 was just my basic waiting time, right? That's saying that, you know, this is life. I'm definitely going to get preempted by tau 1 and by tau 2, and then I will run after that point. And then, but since this is the initial horizon, then I see in that horizon I actually get preempted again and again by tau 1 and tau 2. And so my new horizon is 260. Then I say, okay, in 260, I want to figure out, without drawing this out, will I get preempted again? So now I have A1 over here is, see, let's go back. A1 over here is 260, right? So I'm going to plug in A1 over here, and I'm going to see, okay, I have to execute, which is 100. And then now I have 260 divided by 100, which is, you know, tau 1's execution time multiplied by 40. And so what does that give me over here, right? So that's 2.6, and I take the ceiling, and that becomes 3. That's saying that I'm going to get preempted at least 3 times, or at the most 3 times, by tau 1. And then 260 divided by 150, well, that's still 2. That's still you know, less than 2, but with the ceiling it becomes 2. So it still remains the same. I'm still getting preempted at the most by tau 2 by 2 times. And so now this horizon of saying, okay, well, what is my response time, my worst case response time, that gets shifted out to 300. And that's A2 now. So A3, I plug in now A2 in the formula, and I say, okay, in 300, how many times do I get preempted by tau 1? 3 times. Ceiling is also 3. So fine, it's the same value. So that means A2 and A3 equal each other. Then I know I'm done. So what I have here is an iterative formula that with each iteration, I take the horizon that I have from the previous iteration, and I say, well, how many times am I getting preempted again? And then I say, does it increase? In this case, it stopped increasing. That means it says, this is the maximum I'm getting preempted by the other tasks. And therefore, my response time, which is tau3's response time, is 300, and 300 is less than 350, which is when it's going to finish, and then I'm done. And the good news is that it's less than, so that means I'm schedulable. So before you ask questions, I just want to show you one thing, right? Think about it from the CPU's perspective. The CPU has to run this, then run this, then run this, then run this, then run, and then basically till 300, it just had back-to-back work. And it's kind of like, say, now this week, you just have so much work piled up, and you just have to keep churning through it. After you finish subject 1, you go to subject 2, after subject 2, subject 3, and then you're like, it's Friday evening, and you just finished this lab over here, and you're done. And then a new lab is released after that point. But the new lab is like, it's due a little later, right? But the point is that the CPU had a busy period all the way from 0 to 300. And only when this 300 finished over here, the CPU's busy period was done, and said, oh man, that was like a real, sprint over here to finish that. And so this is called a busy period, where the CPU is continuously, executing, has work to execute continuously without any break in it. There is no break in this time over here. A critical instance is right at the start over here. It's saying that all the tasks have work that is ready to be done, but then they have work again, and that makes it the busiest period. So what we are trying to figure out is, what is the longest, busiest period until which this work has to be done, and then we are done over here. Okay, so that's sort of an example. There's another example of, the response time test over here, and then you can go through that in the same way. So did that make sense? Was that understandable? Okay, any questions so far?
If something passes the RT test, is it definitely schedulable?
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? If you pass a test, then you're okay to go ahead.
I'm sorry, I meant if it doesn't pass the test, is it definitely not scheduled?
Yes, if it doesn't pass the test, it's definitely not schedulable. So the response time test is a conclusive test. It's a sound test, in the sense that if it says that you're not schedulable, it does not have like any ambiguity in it.
Even though you have you're talking about how the ceilings make it so there'll be at most this many preemptions, but theoretically there could be less than that many.
Just think about it. Theoretically, there cannot be less than that, because the higher priority tasks are always going to execute before the lower priority tasks, right? So what the ceiling function is trying to do over here is saying that, look, this task over here, its deadline is later, right? It's over here, but it's going to still preempt you anyway. So suppose we are looking at 260, right? We were looking at 260 in one of the iterations. It says that this task deadline is later than 260, but it's still going to preempt you. So it's just a discretization of the tasks, and they are always going to preempt you. So the ceiling is saying that even though that task's deadline is after 260, it's still going to preempt you. So
so it's not just at most it's going to preempt you that many times. It's the exact number of times it will preempt you.
That's right. The semantics should be refined from at most to exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, does that make sense? If it's not clear, just go through the second example and then ask questions. And so for the Thursday lecture, we'll look at two things. We'll look at the earliest deadline first, which is what the worksheet will be based on, and then we'll look at after that point we'll look at concurrency, right? And the concurrency lecture is a long one, so we'll probably finish about 1/3 of that lecture on the Thursday's meeting, like that, right? So the concurrency lecture is quite tricky. It's full of tricks, and the quiz that is related to the concurrency lecture and the labs that are there for that, they are going to be the trickiest of the labs, okay, and the quizzes. So you want to pay attention to that. and just get the intuition of how to do those kind of problems. But you will have to go through that couple of times. So you should definitely read through the next slide, 14B, I think, and I'll send that out on Piazza, and also the concurrency slides. I think that's 15. Okay, any other questions so far? Okay, let me see. Okay, any other questions? All good? Kate, any other questions? Luke? Yeah.
I still can't find the slides of the last lecture.
The slides?
Yeah, of the
Oh,
last
they're not,
lecture.
are they not on Canvas?
I think so.
Okay, I'll put all the slides on Canvas after this lecture. Okay. Okay, Kate, Caroline, Zia.
I think it is on Canvas. You just have to scroll a couple lectures or slides down. It doesn't have the same like starting slide.
Oh,
If
what's
you
the
just go to
name?
lecture, just go to L14 on Canvas.
Is it 14A, right? Lecture 14A.
Yeah, it's
check.
after operating systems, right? So
It just says on Canvas, there's just a lecture that says L14 RTOS, rate monotonic scheduling. If you scroll down a bit, it has the same slides.
I'll send out a Piazza note on that. Don't worry about it. I'll make sure all the lectures are online, right? Because they're already made. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I still have one quick question. Concerning the quiz, will there be quiz prep material posted for the quiz on Friday?
I'll see if we can post some quiz prep material. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Good question. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Look happy, guys. Got to go through this till the end of the semester. Okay, I'm going to go for a run now. Okay, go and enjoy the good weather. I think it's going to be quite warm in Philly. So, and ask questions. Show up for the next lectures. Don't worry about the rest of the class if they don't show up. You know, it's your thing, right? You learn this stuff well. It'll take you places. Okay. All right. Have a nice day and see you on Thursday then. Bye.